Welcome, everyone. I just looked at my phone. I have a son named Matt who lives in Madison, Wisconsin. It's 7 degrees in Madison. So be grateful for our beautiful weather. Steve's back. Thank you, Carl. Mike Danberger, I'm getting a buzzing humming. We're right on the edge of something. If you could work on that. Thanks. Welcome to all of you. Also welcome to our guests. And thank you to today's greeting line, which was Interact and RYLA, R-Y-L-A. Thank you, Dave. That's Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. For those of you who don't know about that, you should know about it. So please support them. And sad to report, our friend Bill Highlander died during this past week. Many of you, I'm sure, knew Bill. He was a unique man with an incredible life experience, really a mentor to many of us. We'll be giving him a proper eulogy soon. So we'll miss you, Bill. Guests and members with guests, please come on up to the microphone and introduce yourselves. Hello, Fernando.
President Borkenhagen. Nice to see you, pal.
Thank you.
You've been under the weather for a while. Mike Block's guest, which I'm honored to present to us today, is a frequent visitor, Anna Glenn. She's with Sacred Heart.
Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Fernando. Mike Conniff.
Good afternoon, President Steve. Welcome back. We're very happy to have. We missed you when you were gone.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to today's meeting as the rest of for your year. I'm very, very pleased to present a longtime friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Baltej Man. Dr. Man is for short, who's from India. He's been working with San Jose State for many, many years. He's just moved here permanently, and he's looking to cooperate with the university and find other jobs in the community. So. I'm very happy. I wanted to point out, though, that about a month or so ago, I presented a colleague or a friend who wore a kilt, and I called him the Kilt Man. I was kind of jokingly, but I want to point out about Dr. Man. His turban is a religious usage in India among the Sikh peoples. As you know, Sikhism is one of the youngest world religions, and that turban means that this is his devotion to Sikhism. So. And we're not making any jokes about that at all. We appreciate having Dr. Man. He's going to say a few words about his background, too.
Hey, Dr. Man.
Thank you, Mr. President and Dr. Mike, for having afforded me an opportunity to introduce myself. As Mike told, Dr. Baltej Singh Man is my name. I have recently retired as Minister of State for Minority Affairs. I worked with Prime Minister Modi for 5 years, and before that I was Dean at the state-sponsored university which has 40,000 students, and I served, as Mike told, I served the Department of Global Studies here. Now I have joined my family here. My 2 sons are here. One is in Google, another is in Apple, and my 2 daughter-in-laws, one is in Amazon, and youngest one is the model school teacher.
Well, it sounds like you're going to take over the world soon. So
thank you very
welcome.
much. I'm not new to the Rotary. I have been coming over here, and I was a member of the GSU team to England, and I was the president and founder of the Rotary Club at my college and school days.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Man. Welcome. I think that's Jeff Poley behind that mask.
This is President Steve. I'm very happy to bring my my friend and neighbor, retired San Jose Fire Captain Tony Gavan, and hopefully a few more after that.
Welcome, Tony. Hello, Audrey.
Hi, President Steve. Welcome back.
Thanks.
My guest today is Jill Kasser. Jill is a communications consultant who's done PR work with many Silicon Valley businesses and organizations for over a few decades, and we're super happy to have her.
Welcome. Thanks, Jill.
Good afternoon, President Steve.
Hello,
and welcome
Robert.
back. My guest today is Kelly Rutherford, and she is with us on Zoom today. And she is the president of Let's Play Entertainment and Children's Book Club.
Welcome, Kelly, and next time we hope to see you in person. Hi, Jim.
Good afternoon, President Steve. I am very pleased to be able to introduce Dan Ballesteros as our guest today. Dan has spent his entire 30-plus year career at Oak Fenton, where he is a real estate litigator and, more to the point, is the managing partner of this unruly group of lawyers. So, welcome, Dan.
Dan, are you a distant relative of Seve's?
Decidedly not.
I was wondering if I should give you strokes when we play golf, that's all. Welcome. Hi, Bonnie.
Good afternoon, President Steve.
That's no guest.
I'm happy to introduce a friend and my guest today, who is also a visiting Rotarian from Fair Oaks Club in Sacramento, Alita Bray.
Welcome back, Alita. Alita's doing some work in San Jose, and she's going to be coming periodically, so I told her maybe next month to come up and catch us up on her life. Welcome, Alita. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my friends Fernando and Sal for filling in for me the last couple of weeks. I had COVID. I will tell you that it really wasn't very bad, so if you haven't had it, don't be afraid, assuming you're somewhat healthy. So thanks for having me back. And I'm glad the mutiny wasn't successful, Carl. We have a couple new member introductions. Matt Bell and Peter Pabst, are you here? Hello, Peter. Hello, Sylvia. I don't see Matt, but that's okay. It's all yours, Peter.
President Steve, welcome back. I'm glad I didn't have to come over and give you the last rites. My goodness, that would have been a horrible thing. So I am very happy to have co-sponsored Sylvia Skandar-Mahan to be the newest member of our club. Sylvia is the third president and CEO of Cristo Rey San Jose Jesuit High School. She is not a Jesuit, but that we don't hold that against her. But she went to a Jesuit law school. She went to the Santa Clara of the East Coast, also known as Harvard. And she is the proud mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Now, most Rotarians have grandkids that age, so it shows that we are taking in younger members, which is a very good thing. Sylvia is a daughter of immigrants, which is so similar to our kids at Cristo Rey. Her father's from Egypt and her mom is from Cuba. And she is married to our member, Matt Mahan, and I'll let Sylvia continue her own introduction.
Oh, are you okay? Oh, okay. All right. We made it. We're doing okay. Thank you, Peter. I'm so lucky. Peter took a lot of my talking points, so let's wing it a little bit. I'm so lucky to have inherited the foundation that Peter and Matt Bell, who many of you know, built at Cristo Rey. So thank you, Peter, and I get to work with Peter every day. So y'all should be jealous of that. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. As Peter said, my parents were immigrants. And what that meant is that I grew up with a fortunate mix of immigrant parent pressure, deep love of family, and a zest for life that comes from both of my cultures, Egyptian and Cuban, and also a deep appreciation for the importance of education in one's life. Thanks to my dad, I applied and got into Harvard and attended. I studied economics and I met my husband, Matt, there. And then I went to Georgetown Law. I got lucky and got to live after Georgetown, and at Georgetown got to live, work, and study in Barcelona and Cairo and London and New York City until I finally decided to marry Matt and moved to the great state, some say the greatest state, of California. Don't tell my mom I said that, she's still in Miami. But I do love California, even though I miss the tropics every day. And today I bring my heart and soul to the work that we do at Cristo Rey. We work with students who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a private education, but who have big dreams and want to go to college, and we help them get there. Our students work 1 day a week at partner companies, so I spend a lot of my time trying to find those job opportunities for our kids. And I'm lucky that my work and life are really one, because that's my passion, is to help people who have big dreams get to get the resources and access to accomplish those dreams. And I know that so many of you at Rotary share that kind of passion. So I'm so excited to be joining this group. And the last thing I'll say is that my other role is a mom. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. Some of you have met Nina because she came to a Rotary gala before the pandemic. I don't know if anyone remembers that. She was a lot of fun. She was a lot of work, but she was a lot of fun. But I hope to be able to introduce both of my kids to you all too. We like to bring them around. So thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here.
And next, Ed Correa will be introducing our newest member, Maggie Padavani. Ed.
So when I first joined Rotary, my sponsor, Dave Haggerty, impressed upon me the importance of guesting at other Rotary clubs and building alliances and meeting the wonderful people. Very quickly after I joined, he brought me to district events, and I saw this very passionate woman involved in things. And then as I started guesting at other Rotary clubs like Saratoga, Los Gatos, Cupertino, there she was again. And it always seemed that that woman knew everyone and was involved in everything. Well, Maggie Padavani and I became fast friends, and we found that we shared a lot in common. Namely, we like to be in the background pushing to help these great projects move forward. And when I started sharing with her the amazing things that this club did, she decided she wanted to join our club and help us fulfill all the great work that we do. I'd like to introduce Maggie Padavani.
Thank you, Ed, for that wonderful introduction. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Like you, my family also are from another country, from Italy. And so I was raised to be loving and caring and giving. And I still hold those values today. I'm a very proud Italian American. And so is my husband. So my husband, Rick, and I have been married, believe it or not, it'll be 43 years in May. We were married on Mother's Day because of my father. He got a better deal with Leonard's Catering Hall. I'll never forgive him. It rained like hell. We wanted Saturday the 12th, but no, he got a better deal. So that's what happened. But rain, I understand, is good luck, and that's why we're still married, I suppose, right? But we're both from Queens, New York, and how we ended up here is very interesting. My husband was in the semiconductor industry. He got a phone call from a recruiter, and the recruiter, we were married a few months, brought him out to the West Coast. It was on winter in New York, which could be very brutal. He came back and said, we're going to California. I said, what do you mean, California? He said, you're gonna love it. So we did it. We went there, and I wish I knew Rotary back then, but I didn't. But we made our life here. We have a grown son. His name is Jared, and he just got married. He lives in Chattanooga. But a little bit about my work. I'm very passionate about what I do. I own my own business, PR, Padavani PR, and I've been in the high-tech industry all these years. I left the hotel industry in Manhattan to come to here and understand the high-tech industry. My first game was a video game company called Activision, which was a spin-off of Atari, if you remember Atari. I worked for Atari, and then I went on to the software market with Borland, and then on to search engine technology with Netscape, and then on to CyberSource, e-commerce. So I got a really rounded view of my high-tech experience in working with different products. But now I focus on Rotary, and I focus on nonprofits, and I'm here to help raise the awareness of Rotary because we do wonderful things, and that's why I'm in this club. I love this club. I love the people, You're fantastic. And one last thing, Kermit the Frog said, he sang that song, Rainbow Connection. Rotary is my rainbow connection. Thank you.
Christine Burrows, are you here? Come on up. Christine is going to talk about animal-assisted happiness, a community grant recipient, and talk about our program of how we help the community. Christine.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm going to remind you, first of all, and thank you for your support to the foundation and through the gala that we put on. You'll hear more about that today. And also the annual appeal. And some of you have kindly made your donations, and we're still waiting for the rest of you to make your donations towards this appeal. We do this in order to support our community, not only our committee projects, but also we do grants in the community. And this year, because of your generosity, we were able to award $150,000 to various community projects. And we thought it might be especially nice for you to hear from one of those particular organizations. One that you probably haven't heard of before. I hadn't heard of it either. And it's called Animal Assisted Happiness. And it's very interesting, and I'd like to introduce you to the person from this organization that will share their story. It's about barnyard animals and special needs kids. So is Vicki Amaniga here? I hope.
I am online. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, online, great. Hello. Nice to meet you. Anyway, if you could tell us a little bit about your program and how our funds impacted you.
Perfect. I'd be delighted to. So let me share a little bit with you about Animal Assisted Happiness. Animal Assisted Happiness is a place for kids with need to interact with animals and find happiness. I am the co-founder. This was an idea at our kitchen table with our family in Los Altos back in 2008. And since then, we have created over 75,000 smiles for youth with need across the Silicon Valley. Here is where we began. Our inspiration and our angel is Riley. Our family's miniature horse Lollipop went to see Riley in her home in the spring of 2006. That inspired our family to share Lollipop with more kids. I don't know how many of you know horses, but getting a horse to walk up steps and into a house, into a living room on hardwood floors was not something that we knew that Lollipop would do, but she knew she had to do it. Unfortunately, Riley passed away about a month later from brain cancer, but she has continued to be our inspiration and our angel. And Lollipop is still at the Animal Assisted Happiness Smile Farm and still creates smiles. That was in January of 2009 when we formed then Animal Assisted Happiness after a little bit of proof of concept in our backyard in Los Altos Hills. In November of 2017, we opened our beautiful 2.5-acre Smile Farm in the heart of the Silicon Valley at Baylands Park, thanks to a fabulous partnership with the city of Sunnyvale. And as of January 2022, we have created over 75,000 smiles for kids with need throughout the Silicon Valley. Our services are free, but donations are always accepted. We have barnyard buddies, about 100 barnyard buddies across the Animal Assisted Happiness Smile Farm, most of which are rescue themselves. There are still 5 from our family, but over the last 14 years, the other ones that our family started with are no longer with us. We offer personalized family visits for an hour at the Smile Farm. We also take our Barnyard Buddies out to schools, hospitals, and programs for kids with need across the Silicon Valley. We provide vocational education for classrooms, primarily junior high and high school classrooms for kids with special education at the Smile Farm. And one of our founding principles is youth helping youth. As parents of 4 kids ourselves, we wanted to get youth involved with giving back early in hopes that that would continue forever. Harry has some thoughts to share about why he likes animal-assisted happiness. And that is because he fell in love with this little chicken named Vanilla Bean, who visited him in his classroom, visited him at his home, and visited other kids as well. This is in his classroom at Mountain View High School. Thank you very, very much, Rotary, for your grant of $10,000, which helped us buy our livestock trailer. Being in the heart of the Silicon Valley, our family had donated a horse trailer to Animal Assisted Happiness as well as a truck. But over the years, that has not become the most safe horse trailer for in case of an emergency. And your grant helped us to buy this stock trailer. So if we ever need it and need to take the animals out in case of an emergency, a fire or an animal emergency, we now have a stock trailer sitting at the Animal Assisted Happiness Smile Farm, thanks to you. We very, very much appreciate that. Our impact to date is, as I mentioned, over 75,000 smiles. We've completed over 3,400 visits. That's not counting private visits with families at the farm. And then we have 282 partner organizations across the Silicon Valley that we take our animals to, or they bring their kids to us so that they can experience the smile only animals can bring. Animals are kind. They don't judge. They just let you be. They don't put labels on you. And the kids, both our volunteers as well as the kids we serve, absolutely love interacting with our animals. And for so many Silicon Valley kids, the idea of interacting with a mini horse, a mini donkey, an alpaca, a goat, a sheep, a pig, a rabbit, a guinea pig, a duck, even a chicken is not something that they usually get to do. So we have a little oasis and a little piece of paradise at Baylands Park. We are open to the public every Tuesday afternoon for free from 1 to 5, as well as the second Sunday of each month. I'm there the second Sunday of each month and would love to welcome you and show you the Animal Assisted Happiness Smile Farm and introduce you to our Barnyard Buddies. Happy to answer any questions that you have, but we really appreciate you and your grant so that we have the livestock trailer in case of emergencies.
Thank you, Vicki. I don't know about you, but that puts a smile on my face. It makes me appreciate my little doggy more too.
Yes.
And I am special needs. Does anybody have any questions? The nice thing about our foundation is that we award capital grants to organizations, which is usually not available to organizations. Usually they just get program funds. So we're glad to fill that niche in the community, and it's nice to see how it's being used. So thank you so much.
I hope to see you at the Animal Assisted Happiness Smile Farm. Come on over. It's in a little oasis in the heart of the Silicon Valley.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
That was a wonderful example of the work of the beautiful things that our foundation donations support. So all of you, please keep the money coming. Next up, Nancy Williams to talk about the gala.
Okay. I'd like everybody to take out their cell phones. I know we're supposed to put them away and turn them off, but take them out, please. Okay? You all have a calendar. Mark the calendar, March 19th, gala, Rotary Gala, 5:30 until you feel like going home. Now I want you to send a text to your husband, wife, or significant other, okay? I'll dictate. Honey, darling, Pooh Bear, whatever you call your significant other. Please don't make plans for March 19th. We're going to the Rotary Gala. Then add an emoticon. I like the little martini glass, but you can choose Dancing Girl, happy face, anything you want, but just something that, you know, gets the excitement going amongst everyone in your family that you're going to the Rotary Gala. So why did I just do that? Because the number one question I am asked about the gala is, when is the gala again? So I want to make sure everybody knows when it is, because the questions I want to be answering is, how can I sponsor? Who do I call to donate an auction item? These are the things I want you guys to be thinking about, because we would love to have 100% participation in the auction this year. That means everyone in our club will either sponsor the event, attend the event, donate an auction item, or purchase an auction item, preferably all four. I want to take a moment to recognize someone who consistently does just that, Larry Stone. Okay, no booze, no booze. This is a time for an applause. Larry and Carmen Stone have, for the third year in a row, upped their sponsorship level, this year committing to $7,500. I know you definitely don't want to boo that. And on top of that, they once again agreed to donate a fabulous hosted brunch in their backyard, including a tour of their magnificent art collection to the live auction. So they just come through every year. And we have a new event this year too. Jerry Greer is donating a hosted dinner in the backyard of his Almond Valley home, overlooking his private vineyard and featuring fine Greer family wine. So I want to thank Jerry for coming up, stepping up to the auction for the first time this year. So we're actively procuring auction items, and we really ask that everyone give some thought to what you can donate. Vacation homes, parties, art and collectibles. My favorite category, however, is Rotary servitude. That means you donate your time or expertise to be auctioned off for Rotary. Sarah Janigan has been baking cookies and delivering them to the home of the people who bought that auction item for 2 years now. Heather Lerner once auctioned herself off as someone's best friend for a year. So be creative. It's really fun when we have those kinds of items. So Sarah and I are going to be at the back, in the back hallway after Rotary tonight to answer your questions, to maybe help you think about some items that you can donate. And before I hand the podium back to President Steve, I just want to take a minute to thank Comerica Bank for once again signing on as our presenting sponsor. This is, I believe, the 26th year of their sponsorship. So big round of applause. Thank you.
Hey, Bert. Did you forget something today?
I apologize. I have a guest. My right-hand man, and everybody in this room probably knows him anyway, this is Ruben Orozco, and he worked with me for the last 25 years. So I would like to donate $25. Just kidding, Steve. I'll give you $100.
That was an easy $100, wasn't it? So speaking of Larry Stone, come on up, Larry, and he will introduce our speaker today, Scott Budman. Larry.
The proper introduction, thank you very much. Well, let me take my mask off here. What can I say about Scott Budman? Scott is an Emmy Award reporter for NBC Bay Area News. He has been covering technology and business for more than 20 years in Silicon Valley. He has broken stories and interviewed leaders from companies ranging from Apple to Tesla to Facebook, and yes, Theranos. He even spent a time or two in my office. He spent just 4 months in court tracking the Elizabeth Holmes trial, waking up at 4:30 in the morning many times to get there on time. Scott lives in San Jose, has 2 daughters, and has been active in organizations like the Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Please welcome Scott Budman.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you to all of you. I hope this sounds good. I am appreciative of this honor. I have, as Larry might have mentioned, covered Rotary and am really appreciative and respectful of what you all do and how you serve the community. So it's an honor to speak to you today. I will speak a little bit about Theranos and the trial, but I want to make sure, just in case, that I get to all of your questions. And I've noticed, as sort of a Q&A tour that I've been on since the trial, everyone has questions about Elizabeth Holmes or the trial itself or the process or the verdict. And I want to make sure to get to all of those. And I say that as someone who has covered technology in Silicon Valley since just before the dot-com boom. And that itself has been an amazing conversation starter everywhere I go, because it's technology right here in the global heart of technology. And, I recognize many of your faces and have met many of you, fortunately. And I know that some of you come from that world, and all of us are touched by that world. So it's been a fascinating conversation for 23 years or something like that. And never has it been more hot than about this trial. So just a little bit of background on how we got here. And that is sort of the quintessential Silicon Valley story. Many of you know, 19-year-old Stanford student Elizabeth Holmes drops out of college, drops out of Stanford to start a company. First with a little bit of family money, then with a little bit of venture capital money, and then famously and notoriously with a whole lot of funding from some very famous and wealthy donors from the government, a la Henry Kissinger, Secretary James Mattis, Betsy DeVos, all investing millions of dollars. Rupert Murdoch was in there. So we had some venture capital money in the traditional way, but then we also had some government contacts that ponied up a lot of money. And eventually, in fairly short order, Theranos, on the back of nearly $1 billion in investment, became a company worth $9 billion. And the goal here was really interesting: to revolutionize healthcare. And all of us, I imagine, have had a needle stuck into us, whether for testing or to donate blood. And for some people, that's a really tough thing to do. This was going to change that. A blood testing machine that would work on a single prick of your finger to get a small drop of blood, and that would give you all the testing results that you need. It would be faster. It would be much less expensive, as opposed to, say, the Quest diagnostic tests that we all take. And it would be less painful, not only because you don't have a needle, but less painful even mentally, because many people just don't like needles. So this was going to change healthcare. And one of the sort of fan fiction ideas is, imagine in a pandemic where everyone wants testing, had Theranos succeeded. And remember, this was already a $9 billion company 8 years ago. Imagine if it was still around and doing this during the pandemic, what might have been. Maybe it's good that it's not. Anyway, on that promise, Theranos becomes one of the most valuable companies in Silicon Valley. Elizabeth Holmes becomes one of the youngest billionaires ever. She owned roughly half the stock in the company. So at a $9 billion valuation, she's worth nearly $5 billion. The money is rolling in. I myself remember covering the company and talking to her during those days. I remember especially when then Vice President Joe Biden came to town to visit the lab and do a walkthrough. He talked about his own son's tragic battle with cancer and how hard it was to go through all of the testing. It was a very emotional day for a company that at the time we now knew the machines weren't working. And yet we had the Vice President of the United States in their lab talking about how wonderful these machines were. One thing we noticed at the time was, in all of the investment dollars, out of all of the high-profile people that were investing, none of them were involved in healthcare. And as someone who has covered venture capital in Silicon Valley for 20 some odd years, I know firsthand that there are many, many biotech investors on Sand Hill Road. We're not quite where, say, Massachusetts is, but we're getting close. We have a lot of biotech startups, a lot of startups that are fighting cancer. Genentech is here, Gilead is here. We're fighting cancer, we're fighting AIDS. We're fighting all of these diseases with local money, with local employees, with local companies, none of whom were involved with Theranos. And that's interesting, because this was the hot, sexy biotech startup getting all the attention from all the nationwide publications. And yet the local biotech people stayed away. And there were no scientists on the board of directors, just a lot of politicians who kind of fit a demographic of older men who were involved in politics, but not science. And this all came to light in about 2015, late 2015, when an article by the Wall Street Journal's John Carreyrou was published, and it really brought the house down. It pointed out that the machines were not working, that the tests were not accurate, and that there were a lot of doubts, even from inside the company, that Theranos could do what it wanted to do. And then the feds got involved looking in, and federal charges filed pretty closely. And sure enough, we had those federal charges of investor fraud, patient fraud. By now, you may remember, and some of you may have even taken some of these tests, they were in Walgreens. The Theranos machines had gone public and they were in Walgreens. You could walk right in and get one of these blood tests. The interesting thing when all of this came to light is a lot of the testing was done in Arizona, but some of it was also done along the peninsula in Palo Alto and just casually. And this happened during the pandemic. And so I must admit, I wasn't seeing a lot of people during the pandemic. I haven't been, other than at work. And I remember running into some friends who I hadn't seen in about a year and just, hey, catching up, and how are you? How's your health? And they mentioned, oh, you're covering this trial. You know, I got a test at Walgreens. It told me I had lupus. This was a woman I know who has 2 young kids. She completely freaked out, had a whole bunch of tests done, and found out the test was inaccurate and she was indeed healthy. And I thought, whoa, this is someone I know. Like, I swing a dead cat around and you'd see someone who took one of these Theranos tests and who had that. And sure enough, that would come up later in the trial. And so once the charges were filed, originally 12, eventually during the trial knocked down to 11, trial of fraud against investors, i.e. taking their money when she and her partner, and it turned out romantic partner for many years, Sunny Balwani, knew that the machines didn't work. That's fraud. Also fraud against patients, i.e. putting machines into stores to test your blood when the company knew those tests were not going to come back or were likely to not come back as accurate. So these are the charges. Also conspiracy by the 2, Holmes and Balwani, to defraud investors and patients. So we had 4 charges of fraud against patients, 4 against investors, 3 ultimately of conspiracy to defraud. And then the trial started. And from the jump, this was really the trial heard around the world. I remember convincing my bosses to let me cover it. And admittedly, in some of the early days, it was a little slow. You're just sort of sketching things out, meeting some of the early investors, meeting some of the people who were employees of this company. And we didn't have big crowds or anything at the time in the courtroom, but to me, it was fascinating. I've covered tech for many years, but certainly not trials or courtrooms. I don't know my way around a courtroom. Well, I do now, but 4.5 months ago, I didn't. And so I was following, whether just trying to sit next to someone in court who covered trials, I followed them on Twitter. I got to know sort of the pacing of what people are interested in. And again, from the jump, everywhere I went, people came up to me and wanted to talk about this. It was sort of like the day of an iPhone release, but every day for 4 months. And that was new for me and for reporters in general. When we cover a story, we cover it, and then generally the next day we're on to something else, or we're covering it and something catches on fire and we quickly move on to that, and all of a sudden we're the experts in buildings that are on fire. But this was something for 4 months that I really got to dig into, and that's very rare. And it was honestly a privilege as a reporter to get into something this deeply. Like I said, I had covered Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes before, but certainly got to know much deeper what was going on. I had briefly covered jury trials, but very few of them. Got to know what the jury was seeing, got to actually be in a courtroom for some of these very tense moments. And there were tense moments. Some of the witnesses admittedly were dry. A former lab director, an investor's lawyer, not much to learn from that. But James Mattis, our former defense secretary under President Trump, was testifying in person in the courtroom. And there is a respect for someone like that, kind of a reverence almost. And when he was testifying, you could just see the jurors kind of lean forward because they were in the presence of somebody who they had only seen on CNN, and who talked a lot about the battlefield and things like that. So that was interesting. When a patient testified, the first patient to testify was someone who had been told by a Theranos test while pregnant that she had lost the child, that she had miscarried the child. And she testified about how, you can imagine how emotional that was. Her nurse practitioner at the time said, "This is a little strange because it just doesn't seem that way. Let's take some more tests of the Quest variety, if you will." And they came back fine. Her levels were fine. The baby was fine. She ended up delivering a healthy baby after being told by a Theranos blood test that she had lost the child. Another patient came up and he was told he had prostate cancer. Again, the courtroom got very nervous. You can always imagine, I mean, getting that diagnosis. He took some more tests, much like my friend who was told she had lupus, and again, was told the verdict was, the trial result was wrong, that he did not have prostate cancer. There was another woman who was told her HIV levels were high. HIV, holy Toledo, again, more tests of a different variety, and the Theranos test was proven wrong. So bringing these people out was very emotional. Bringing the investors out was interesting too, but that was a little different because these were very, very wealthy people who had invested hundreds of thousands, in the case of Rupert Murdoch or Betsy DeVos, millions of dollars, and they were defrauded, but it didn't rock their lives like many of us would be of an investment of anywhere near that magnitude. But still, interesting testimony. And then, although we were not told that this would happen, Elizabeth Holmes herself took the stand. And that's when everything got really crazy. All of a sudden, outside the courtroom, dozens of cameras every day. There were only a certain number of seats in the courtroom, and we had to get there at 4:45 in the morning, even reporters, to get one, because it wasn't just reporters, and there were reporters from all over the country there, but what I called sort of court tourists, people who were just there to be close to Elizabeth Holmes, would show up, whether young people who had some time on their hand, unemployed people, retired people. They all wanted to check it out. I talked to a lot of these people. One was a husband and wife team, both who worked in healthcare, who drove down from Oakland for the day and took the day off work just to be part of this trial for a day. One gentleman drove up from Los Angeles because of all the hype. He just had to see this in person. One professor flew out from New York, a law professor, because he wanted to see this up close so he could go back and talk to his students. It was that kind of a, I don't want to say circus, but that kind of a trial. Everyone wanted a piece of it. And interestingly enough, especially as a TV reporter, what's the one advantage TV reporters can do is to take you somewhere via the pictures, via a live shot. But because it was a federal trial, no cameras were allowed. So this became a trial that really lived and breathed on social media more than any other story. You can always see the new iPhone. You can see if your stock is going up or down. You can see the new Tesla, excuse me. But you couldn't see what was going on in the Elizabeth Holmes courtroom. And so all of a sudden, this became very big on social media. People came up to me in the streets, and instead of saying, "Hey, I saw the story last night," they would start it with, "Hey, I saw your tweets yesterday." And that became everything I heard for 4 months. I put out a tweet with some of the text messages between Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes, which were put out to establish that they had a romantic relationship when they weren't forthcoming about that, either to employees or investors. And I thought it was just, hey, this is some evidence that went out there. And it was a little bit of a mushy thing. Elizabeth Holmes had called him Tiger, and whatever it was, it got looked at and clicked on, that one tweet, 11 million times. And that's how bananas this thing was. It got printed in publications. It got printed in newspapers. It became kind of a weird calling card. But all of a sudden, podcasts wanted to talk to me, and clubs and radio stations. And it just became this trial that just got bigger than anything I had covered before. And so we got to the verdict, and we actually had a verdict day. And again, dozens of cameras were outside. This was huge. This was national news, in some cases, international news. I met reporters from different countries. And, the verdict eventually came down. It was a mixed bag, but a victory for the prosecution, according to court watchers. Four of the charges against Elizabeth Holmes, she was found guilty. Investor fraud, guilty of fraudulent behavior against the investors. Interestingly, 4 charges she was found not guilty on, and those were largely dealing with the patients. I must admit, I was a little bit surprised, but in talking to the jurors afterwards, they said that Holmes, in her testimony, had established enough of a buffer between her and the patients. They didn't link her directly to them. She was found not guilty. And then the conspiracy charges, they were deadlocked on. So we didn't have a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict. And that was largely because by the end of Theranos, the relationship between Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes was finished. Not only had he left the company, they had broken up, and she had, in court, accused him of abuse, physical and mental abuse. As this came out, even before the trial, the judge in the case decided, although they were both charged with the same thing, because of the abuse charges and their deteriorating relationship, he would separate the 2 trials. So Elizabeth Holmes had her own trial, and because this is the trial that keeps on giving, Sunny Balwani is set in the same courthouse to go in early March. So I don't know if we'll cover that one as strongly, but there we have it. Elizabeth Holmes now waiting for her sentence, and we will find that out in September, we are told. And in the meanwhile, Sunny Balwani's trial starts in about a month and a half. So there we have sort of an outline of what this was and how it ended. And on that note, I want to make sure that I get to all of your questions. So I'd love to allow a lot of time for that. And, so I can take them both verbally, I guess, or I see that they're coming in via the chat. So I will open up the chat, and one person, Patricia Fox, what is your opinion on how the judge ran the trial? And I can answer that by quoting those who cover a lot of trials, because I wasn't sure. But according to those who cover a lot of trials, this is Judge Davila in federal court in San Jose. And I agree with this, that he ran it very, very thoughtfully, very gradually. There were many times when I was surprised he was allowing question after question, especially on the cross-examination. And the court expert said, well, he's doing that to make sure there's no mistrial. He really wants to see this one to its conclusion only once, because it was obviously a long trial with a lot of attention. So how the judge ran the trial, turns out, was, according to the popular opinion, and I agree with this, it was very thoughtful, it was respectful to everybody, nobody was cut off, everybody had a chance to ask question after question. And again, as someone covering the trial, there were several times when it seemed to drag. And I thought, why is the judge doing this? He wants to make sure that no one looks back and says there were mistakes made. From Gay Crawford. Hey, Gay, how are you? Since cameras weren't allowed, having worked at CanTV, yes, surprise, allowed you to cover for 4 months. Did NBC see it as a national story early on? Great question. Early on, honestly, we covered the trial because it was in our backyard. And from the get-go, there were reporters from New York and Los Angeles and everywhere covering this trial. And so it was interesting to be the home team. And I was glad we started out, at least, so we didn't fall behind. And then honestly, it was the social media that this thing really launched from. And when you get millions of clicks in a day for a story, it's easy to go to your bosses and say, people are really interested in this. Let's keep going. And there were a few days when, they weren't sure about it. And I admit, when those few days, nothing big happened, I thought, are they going to let me keep going? But it was a bit of a gamble, and I think it worked out. Because again, we became the home team for a national, even international story, to where the network was calling me and saying, hey, can you talk about this? Can you do this? And all the podcasts were calling and stuff like that. So it is rare as a daily reporter to be able to cover something for 4 months. It's extremely rare. I haven't done it before, and I've been in this game for a long time. So yeah, that was kind of rare. And this was just a fascinating story and a fascinating experience.
Scott, this is President Steve running the meeting. I'm not sure if you can see me on the Zoom.
Hello.
But I'd like some questions to come from the room here, and then I'll let you know if we want to do some more Zoom questions, depending on how much time we have. And also, I would ask to make your answers as brief as possible so we can maximize the number of questions. So Carl's going to ask a question in a moment, but I want to remind Red Badgers, you have a card to go to the front of the line if you would like to ask questions. So Carl Salas, go ahead.
Scott, I've been looking forward to this all week, and you did not disappoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
2 questions real quick. Her chief scientist committed suicide, but the jury was not able to know that. Can you comment on that? That's question number 1. Question number 2 was, my wife and I did a back of an envelope calculation, and we know that her attorneys must have cost at least $10 million. With Theranos stock being 0, where did her money come from and continues to come from for all those attorneys?
Both great questions. And yes, especially if you read Bad Blood, you know of the suicide of the Theranos employee, which is not only tragic, but really speaks to the culture of the company. And at least for that one individual, it was what ultimately put him over the edge, sadly. It didn't come up. A lot of things didn't come up either from the book or the documentaries or even, the knowledge of those of us who had covered the company. And those were laid out early on because they just didn't have to do with the actual trial and the actual charges. And so the judge had laid out and continued during the trial to lay certain things out that I guess couldn't be brought up simply because they might change how the jury saw her and saw the company without it having anything to do with the actual case. And the boundaries of the case for some people were a little narrow, and they didn't allow some of those things. And that was a bit of surprise. For example, when the patients talked about getting the inaccurate results, the lawyers were told you cannot get into their mental state after getting the inaccurate results because their mental state is not germane to the trial. And that was interesting. Now, granted, the woman who talked about getting a result that said her baby had been miscarried, when she was talking, her voice cracked. She was very emotional, but they couldn't get into the emotions. Let's see, your second question on the money. So Elizabeth Holmes' partner is apparently an heir to a real estate fortune. I don't want to speculate, but they have a lot of money on that side of the family. So
next question, Arthur Weisbrot.
So we know that the jury found no fraud against the patients. So the only people we really found fraud with are enormously wealthy people who could do as much due diligence as they wanted to do. They could have hired engineers, they could have hired scientists. And so we spent all this money and all this time and all this publicity on a trial to protect Betsy DeVos or to protect Rupert Murdoch. How do you feel about this in the broad scheme of things, given that's the result?
It's a great question. And I must say, if I were on the jury, and remember, I wasn't, but as I sat there, I didn't feel a lot of sympathy for Betsy DeVos or Rupert Murdoch, or frankly, any of the investors, because, they knew what they were getting into. Now, were they lied to? Yes. And that's what the jury ultimately found, that they were lied to directly by Elizabeth Holmes. And that's the definition of fraud. And we even heard investor calls where the investors are on one line, Elizabeth Holmes on the other, and she was describing, for example, how Theranos machines were being used by the Department of Defense when they were not. She talked about how many tests were being done and accurately given out when they were not. She talked about how large pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Roche were involved when they were not. So that is the textbook definition of fraud. And yes, therefore, the guilty verdicts came down to help those who were already really wealthy. Personally, I didn't feel all that much sympathy for them. I did feel a lot of sympathy for the patients. I couldn't forgive her. Again, not that it matters, I'm just a reporter. I couldn't forgive her putting those machines into the public, knowing that the machines were not accurate. But the jury, and they spoke even after the case, said they could not link her directly to those test results as they could to the investors. And that's why they found her guilty of those 4 and not guilty of the other 4.
Fernando Zazueta.
Thank you, Scott. That was very well done.
Thank you.
Get a chance to read about the trial either on TV or the newspapers or in the social media, but you were there, and I just wonder, because my wife has asked me, do you think that if she's guilty, what should her punishment be? And since you were there, maybe you have an opinion.
It's a good question. I don't know much about federal fraud punishments. The one thing that I covered a while ago, and you may remember this, the Martin Shkreli trial. Martin Shkreli, famously called the Pharma Bro, was initially a Silicon Valley investor who started a biotech company, essentially with his investment dollars, and then famously raised the price of drugs to the point where a lot of people couldn't afford them. I did the first interview with him that anybody did. And so I stuck with the case, and I was interested. And here's someone who was found to have priced drugs fraudulently out of the reach of patients. And fraudulently, he was found guilty of fraud. He was given, I believe, 6 or 7 years. Now, again, much like the Holmes trial, nobody died, but patients were affected, investors were affected, and he is serving a 7-year term. Is she going to get that much? I don't know. But one thing that came up a lot was the desire to send a message to Silicon Valley, to the investors, to the CEOs, to say there's got to be more transparency and honesty. If she goes to jail, really for any amount of time, I think that message will be sent. So I wouldn't be surprised if she does go to jail for some amount of time. I just can't see it being any higher than 6 or 7 years, because that's what what Martin Shkreli got.
Scott, we're going to have one more question from, is that Terry Chapman behind that mask? And Scott, if you could give a very brief answer, I'd appreciate it. Terry, go ahead.
Scott, what impact do you think it had on the jury and all of those present, the fact that she was a new mother?
Great question. I don't think it had any impact on what the jury decided, because it really didn't come up. Some of the more cynical attorneys that I interviewed during the case said, hey, have we seen the baby yet? It didn't happen in the trial. The big question is, she is a new mother. Will that affect the sentencing? I don't know, but that is definitely going to come up. Do you want to send a new mother to jail?
Scott, thank you for a wonderful program today.
Thank you.
We are making a contribution in your name to the Urban Vibrancy Institute, trying to make downtown San Jose a more exciting place, something that's important to all of us. I will point out to all of you, the San Jose State University Rotary Committee will meet right after lunch today. And for those who wish to attend, Jason Alexander and Mike Conniff will be right over here somewhere. There's Mike, and just walk over with them. There's also a Zoom option for that meeting when you go back to your office, if you like. Next week, our speaker will be Rick Steves. Those of you who watch television probably know who Rick is. He will be on Zoom, but it should be a fabulous program. And thanks to my friend Jeff Poley for putting that together. And with that, meeting adjourned. Have a great week.